Another million people could potentially lose their job in 2024 after the most recent agreement with the Department of Justice and the National Association of Realtors.
The National Association of Realtors, which represents more than 1 million real estate agents nationwide, settled a number of lawsuits Friday.
The National Association of Realtors has agreed to pay $418 million in damages.
A lawsuit settlement by the National Association of Realtors is getting rid of the standard 6% commission for realtors.
The National Association of Realtors just offered to settle an ongoing lawsuit with the Department of Justice for $418 million. Now, along with the $418 million, the settlement also proposes that the MLS, the multi-listing service, which is where all agents list properties nationally, can no longer list a buyer's agent's commission anywhere on the listing. According to this settlement, a buyer must enter into a separate agreement with their agent. So buyer's agents will no longer get to start showing clients properties and know what compensation they're receiving up front without negotiating that with the buyer first, which is what the MLS provided, an area that indicated how much the seller is willing to pay a buyer's agent. But now, showing the buyer agent commission will be removed from the MLS. So buyers will need to work out the compensation with the agent beforehand. Critics argue that it would be less affordable for first-time home buyers to purchase a home because they will have to pay a buyer's agent up front. However, this is probably the least likely thing to happen, as the settlement still allows negotiation outside of the MLS. So essentially, a buyer would either go directly to a seller's agent who is listing the home unrepresented, and the listing agent would do all the contract legwork, or the buyer would find a home, then get a buyer's agent who would negotiate a commission into the contract of that existing listing. The main issue I see with this is how many agents could potentially quit because of this new rule. In some estimates, it's up to 1 million agents. See, if an agent doesn't know how much they will make on a transaction up front, they may just decide to give up being a real estate agent altogether. And we've yet to see how these pieces will fall here, but currently no one wins, in my opinion, except for the lawyers who argued this case for the class action suit. See, this all stemmed from multiple lawsuits alleging that the National Association of Realtors and several brokerages conspired to require home sellers to pay a home buyer's agent commission, thus taking away from sellers' profits. Some believe that home prices will fall as a result of this agreement. But to me, that just does not hold any weight, because in reality, home values are built on well-established comparables in the area, and sellers are unlikely to lower their prices to accommodate the lack of buyer's agent commissions being paid out at closing. Sellers would just potentially receive 3% more of the funds at the closing table, which leaves them, aside from the lawyers arguing this case, who made millions and millions of dollars, the ones who actually benefit the most. After lawyers are paid, what's remaining from the $418 million will distribute pennies to anyone in the class action lawsuit who is affected prior to this agreement. This agreement by the National Association of Realtors does leave room for negotiations outside of the MLS though, which could potentially drive traffic and listings directly to sites such as Zillow and Redfin and Realtor.com, which already receive their listing data from the MLS. So buyer's agents are potentially losing millions in commissions or out of work, and who benefits? Corporate America, of course. So if someone is savvy, they go directly to Zillow or Redfin or Realtor.com, who has all this newly acquired business due to agents being forced out of a job, and they search for a home there. Or what I believe will happen is sellers' listings will go directly to these sites, completely circumventing the MLS, which, if you remember, was barred from listing or advertising any agent's commissions for the buyer side. And that will be where listings start and end. That's my personal opinion of how this will shake out. It's completely reasonable to think that buyers would just go directly to Zillow or Realtor.com or any other site that has a large populace of listings to find their own properties. They would completely forego the buyer's agent. Then they would contact the agent who has whatever home they're interested in listed, and that agent would draw up all the contracts, and assist with the process. However, the problem with this is the buyer would essentially be left without a third party negotiating on their behalf. But if you're a savvy buyer, the process would be like any other time, except you would be doing the negotiation directly with the listing agent, directly with the seller, and not relying on a buyer's agent to go back and forth. So sellers potentially get a little bit more at the closing table. Buyers are possibly left without representation, and a big question mark as to how to pay for the representation, and real estate agents could potentially quit in droves at a time when the economy is already seeing mass layoffs. Unfortunately, this will cause agents to quit if they haven't already from other factors. Business and sales have been way down, so hopefully they have found other means of employment to support them and won't be greatly affected by this decision from the National Association of Realtors and the Department of Justice. According to this article, this is the third straight year of membership decline, and there are currently 85,000 fewer members in January of this year than October of 2022, which is less dramatic than the 400,000 agents that left the industry between 2008 and 2012. But with this new ruling, there could potentially be a giant exodus of realtors in 2024. Because not only is it this new ruling that might sway real estate agents to find a new profession, but also the fact that rates have stayed higher longer than anticipated, which is driving down demand in the housing market. Less business for agents means less money in their pockets. And if they can make a consistent, decent living wage elsewhere, they could be likely to give up being a real estate agent altogether and just move into a different profession. So there's still a lot of unknowns as far as how all the pieces will fall after this decision by the National Association of Realtors and the Department of Justice. As I mentioned earlier in the video, this could potentially drive business to websites such as Zillow. There's a lot of pieces in the community that are affected by this, like title companies. So not only are buyers agents affected in how they do business, but some of these other agencies are affected as well. One of the ways I see this being circumvented is all that business going on to Zillow.com and not being placed strictly on the MLS. But one thing that I didn't talk about is how the MLS provides a bit of security to sellers and buyers. Agents have to get licensed and they have to abide by certain ethical standards. So with the MLS, something that you get is a level of security for whoever's going to be in your home. On the MLS, it's restricted to licensed agents, and they have to pay a fee every month in order to subscribe to that. And so if I list my home on there and someone wants to look at my home, the code is listed on the MLS or they have to contact me prior. Whereas if the MLS gets circumvented and someone just lists their property on Zillow or Realtor.com or whatever it ends up being, then that level of security could potentially be gone. That's the only other thing. I'm not quite sure how that will be worked out. I haven't heard anybody else talk about that. When you're on Zillow, when you're listing your home on Zillow, like for sale by owner, it's a lot like Facebook Marketplace. So usually it's a realtor contacting you, but it's a little bit more of a free-for-all, whereas the MLS is restricted to only real estate agents. In my personal opinion, I don't really agree with all the commissions that real estate agents get paid, especially on the buyer side. I'm a real estate investor. I have bought and sold dozens of homes by myself. And since I've done these by myself, I know what the process is and I know how easy it is. So currently I am selling one home that is an investment property and I listed that myself. I paid for a service to list it on the MLS and I am doing the whole process. It's very, very simple, but I have a personal residence that I actually am using a realtor for, and I'm paying out somewhere around $25,000 in commissions. And I do think that my listing agent deserves a lot of those commissions, but the buyer's agent, they just bring you a buyer essentially, but that buyer could have found that listing otherwise. There is a possibility that buyers just get comfortable doing this themselves. You're seeing a lot of headlines that say real estate industry changed forever. And that could very well be a possibility. And one of the outcomes of this might be, over a long course of time, people just learn to negotiate and learn the contract side of this themselves. So anyways, I'm curious what your thoughts are. Please drop it in the comments down below, especially if you are a real estate agent. I'm sure that I left a ton out of this video, but hopefully I covered all the basics for you. And as always, the only way for you to stay prepared is to stay informed. So please smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.